Welcome to our latest Hobby Center video. Today I'd like to talk to you about the very basic concepts of model rockets. Now if you've done model rockets in the past or are thinking about getting back into it and you have experience, this video probably isn't for you. This is going to be the absolute basics of what these rockets are, what they do, and what you need to be part of this exciting hobby. As a bit of a back note, as a kid growing up in London, Ontario, I never ever saw a model rocket. None of my friends did them. Never saw one in the neighborhood. Never saw one, period. I did see this selection of bagged cardboard and balsa kits. One of them was a Beaumark missile. That caught my eye. And I had a look at this thing, and it said it was some kind of rocket and that, but there wasn't a whole lot on the store display to tell me what it was, what it did, what I needed. So I never had any exposure to this thing. Then I opened the Hobby Center in 1986. And I found out that model rockets were a thing and they were exciting and people liked them. So of course we carry them in the store, and once you carry something in the store, it's sort of incumbent on you to learn something about them. So I learned about rockets and how they work and what makes them tick. Even so far to the point where the Hobby Center every Victoria Day Monday went to General Vanier Public School off of Walkley Road, and we fired model rockets as a preemptory show to the fireworks display that happened after dark. We did that for 10 or 12 years, I think. Also, I did some work with the Ottawa School Board. Mr. Dwayne Skinner got me to come and do model rocketry with some of his math classes. We flew model rockets at the back of the high school, and the kids measured angles and distances and used trigonometry to do the math of the altitude and the vectors and the distance and so forth. So that was a lot of fun and very educational for the kids. That is one thing that's exciting about model rockets. You have the fun component of doing model rockets, but there's a lot of educational aspects to it. And there's been a number of things talked about, like astronauts, for example, did model rockets as kids, and that inspired them to carry on. A lot of scout troops have done model rockets, and again, some school boards and school classes do them. So really, there's a real basic concept to model rocketry. To get into the hobby of model rockets, it's easiest to start with a starter set. The starter set is a specially priced package of components. And inside the rocket starter set, you get the launch pad, you get the electrical ignition system, and you get the model rocket. So those are the three major hard components, if you will. The variable components are the model rocket engines. And these are a class of firework. They're solid fuel rockets that are ignited electrically using a little flare, which ignites the gunpowder and fires off the motor. The model rockets are tailored to fit the aperture in the rocket itself. So this rocket here will accept an engine of this diameter, which can be inserted into there. The model flies, does its thing. Then when you recover it, you take that engine out, you insert a new engine, and do it over again. So, as I say, the model starter set contains these components. Now you can buy this on its own, the launch stand. You can buy the electrical component on its own. Many people have had to do that when they've lost pieces of them or needed to replace them. The cost of these things adds up way more than the cost of the starter set. So really, this is the way to go. Starter sets vary mostly on the type of rocket that's in it, like the size of it. There might be two of them. It might have a helicopter recovery system or some little keen feature. Some of them are kits that you would build, usually simple in the starter one because they don't want to discourage you in the beginning. Some of them will come basically all ready to fly. This rocket, as you can see, is pretty much assembled. All you would have to do is assemble your pad and insert your engines. You'd probably be ready to go in under 30 minutes. So as I briefly discussed, we have our launch pad. Now this allows a stable platform for your model rocket to take off. The commercial pad, of course, has this little safety bit on the top so somebody doesn't put an eye out on the rod. It also has a blast deflector. So when this rocket takes off and that flame spews out the bottom, it deflects outwards and not into the grass underneath you. It's a real thing. The model rocketry group some number of years ago had an incident where they started a grass fire where they fire their rockets. The grass was very dry. It was summer. Everybody was watching the rockets. Nobody was watching the grass. Anyways, they put it out. No harm, no foul. But it's something to be aware of. Rockets can be as simple or as elaborate as you want. This is a cardboard rocket with a plastic nose cone. It had balsa wood fins. Our own airbrush guru, Hank Grubin, built and painted this one. He put a spiffy airbrush paint job on it, put some Hobby Center logos, painted the cockpit. I mean, he made it look really nice. Some people just like to slap them together and fly them. Other people like to collect them, build them, and assemble a fleet. That's the neat thing. Once you have the stand, the igniter, then you can buy extra model rocket kits. They range in size from little tiny ones to very large ones. This rod is a beginner rod. It's made for the small to intermediate rockets. It will also accept a larger diameter metal rod for a rocket that's heavier. See, because you can see this thing wiggling here. When you put a bit of weight on it, it tends to lean. So you put the heavier rod on to stop that. So we have our model rocket. Just to show you what's going on here. You take your model engine. This is an oversized one, just so you can see it for illustration purposes. The engine itself has the solid fuel. There's three components to it. There's the main blast, or the lift-off blast, and it has a little hole in it. That's for your igniter to go. That's how you tell the top from the bottom. Then this thing flares off, and in many cases it can take a second and a half, and it's done. Then there's a little fuse in there. This thing stops firing. The fuse ignites. The fuse goes up, and then there's a little bit of powder in the top, and that causes an upblast. So, model flies up. Then the fuse goes off. Then the upblast pushes the nose off and pushes out your parachute or your streamer. In this case, we have a parachute. So it blows out the parachute, allowing the rocket to safely come down to Earth. You recover it and do it all over again. Now, say we've taken the proper size engine, we insert it into the rocket. There's a little clip there that holds it in place. We would take our parachute and we would carefully fold it up. And before we put it in there, one must use some flame retarded wadding. What the wadding does is protect whatever's in there from the up blast of the engine, because it's the same as the down blast, it's just faster and shorter. So it pushes everything out in a hurry, and if you don't have something between your plastic parachute and the up blast, it's going to melt and you're going to end up with a molten mass of plastic. So we've packed it up, we've put it in there, we shoved the shock cord or the string in there which holds the parachute to the nose cone, also to the rocket. It's usually made out of an elastic material so that it doesn't just fly off and you lose it. So imagine we've put our wadding in there, we've put everything in, we've put our engine in there. Now on our rocket we have what are called launch lug. There may be one, there may be two. What this does is it fits over the rod on our launch pad, like so. Okay, so our rocket is sitting on our launch pad. That rod will guide it in the direction you want. If you were to just take it off from the ground, it would just randomly go in some direction. It might go horizontal, it might go vertical, it might spin, you don't know. So this sets it on a trajectory. The rocket launcher is able to vary its angle. So you can tilt it. It's like the wind's coming this way, you tilt a little bit into the wind to compensate. Now keep in mind, a little bit goes a long way. So if this is to move like 1 or 2 degrees off vertical, and it goes up 1,000 feet, well, you can imagine the distance that's going to be involved when it gets there. So don't overcompensate for wind, or you'll end up sending it into the next county. So, we've got the rocket on there. We've got the engine inside. We have what are called igniters. It's a little bit of nichrome wire, and it's got a phosphorus type material on it. So when this is put into the rocket, like so, that little bit of phosphorus contacts the gunpowder or the fuel in the rocket, and when it's ignited, it sends the rocket off. We have a little plug to go in there to hold it in place. Like so. So the fuse, our igniter, is in there. There's our metal leads. So this guy, picture it inside the rocket. This is way oversized for this rocket. I'm just using it because it's big and you can hopefully see what I'm doing. The next phase, rocket's there, engine's there. When this is sitting inside that rocket, inside the rocket, and these guys are hanging out the bottom, that's where your electric ignition system comes in. You put one lead, these little alligator clips, on each one of the leads. Then you've got about 20 feet of wire to get you safely away from the rocket. And before you can set it off, you have a little light there. The light is not on until you insert the safety key. A lot of people put the safety key, attach it to the safety cap that goes on that. So if you've got that on there and the safety key's with it, you would have to physically take it off and over to your launcher. So this is so nobody can light it off while you're holding on to it. Once that would be pressed into there, the light would come on, showing a completed circuit. You press the button, and that should fire this off, immediately setting your rocket up. Again, if you've never seen a model rocket in action, these things are fast. The burst is only about a second, second and a half. So your rocket that's going 800 feet or 1,000 feet in the air is up there in a second, second and a half. So it's not like the Cape Canaveral where it's more like. Try to catch that with your video camera or your smartphone. It's really hard to track them. Then it gets way up there. This thing ejects. There's a bit of a puff of a smoke, and then hopefully, you see the streamer or the parachute. You see it, you track it, you get it back, and you do it all over again. So I guess it goes without saying, trees are not friendly to these things. Water is not friendly to these things. So be careful where you launch it. A lot of hydro wires are not good for these things. They'll hang up on the hydro wire. I've seen it happen. They'll hang up in the tree. You know that kite-eating tree from Charlie Brown? They'll eat your rocket too. And of course, bodies of water, they get in. Even if you get them in time before they sink, because there's a lot of cardboard and balsa wood in that, chances are it's going to get soggy, waterlogged, be no good to you in the future. You can fly these many, many times as long as you keep them in repair and recover them safely. So we've talked about the electrical system, the launch pad, the rockets. So it goes without saying, once you have the system and you know how the system works, then there's a whole range of model rockets you can buy, ranging again from very small to very large. Some will carry eggs, some have payloads. You can send your grasshopper into space and see how he does. We used to like to buy those little plastic parachute men. Remember those Poopa Troopas? If the rocket diameter was big enough, you could insert one of those in with your parachute. When it pops out goes the paratroop guy, and he flies off on his own to the ground. You can get multi-stage rockets where you put 2 or 3 engines, and as soon as one fires in the next one, fires the next one. The height for the biggest one that I'm aware of in the smaller class, not high-powered rocketry, is about a half a mile with the 3-stage Comanche rocket. Height and altitude, of course, vary on the strength of the engines, and they vary on the vehicle itself. The more, well, it's like everything. The more streamlined it is, the more like an arrow it is, you know, basic fins, basic body, no drag, the higher they go. Light, streamlined, they go very high. They get bulky, they get scale-like, they look like Star Wars ships or whatnot. The altitude, of course, becomes much less because you got that extra weight, and you got the lack of aerodynamic. In fact, they made a model, I don't think it's currently available, of the Starship Enterprise. So it's basically a rod with an Enterprise attached to it. It didn't fly well. It looked very cool, but it did not fly well. Going back to model rockets, the engines. Engines is where you can vary your altitudes. This is what I call the basic class of rocket, or the most populous class. That diameter, which is about roughly ½ an inch, will take A, B, or C size rockets. So if an A would put it up 200 feet, a B would put it up 400 feet, and the C would put it up 800 feet. Each one doubles. So if you're in a small field, or you've got a windy day, you may not want it to go up 1,000 or 1,200 feet in the air. You may only want it to go up 400 feet in the air. So you can vary the power of the rocket depending what you're doing. And also the model rocket itself will call out the power rocket you need. So those heavier rockets we talked about will need a higher value rocket just to lift it off because of the weight component. One other thing we should talk about when we're talking about the model rocket power, we talked about A, B, and C, we talked about mini engines, we talked about larger engines. The numbers on these things. For example, this one says C67. The C, of course, tells us it's the most powerful of the ABC class. The 6 is an impulse thing. I have not seen any difference performance-wise between a C6 and a C5, say. Okay? The last number, though, is important. -7, or -4, or -5. After the dash, the number is the amount of seconds that go between the main rocket blast and then the ejection charge. Remember I told you there was a fuse in between there? So this fires up, second and a half. So this thing is at its maximum altitude. Now it's still got some impulse, so it's still going even though the rocket engine stops. And then maybe it starts to fall down. So between that final main blast running out of fuel, the fuse immediately ignites. In this case, it's 7 seconds. So 1 steamboat, 2 steamboat, 3 steamboat, 4 steamboat, 5 steamboat, 6 steamboat, 7 steamboat, bam! Then off comes the nose cone. Now we use that for several reasons. One is wind. We talked about wind earlier. If you put less delay on it, it will come back further down. Like once it hits its apogee or full height, then it starts to come down. It'll fall to those 5-6 seconds before it pops, so it brings it a little closer to the ground. The other reason for these delays, or very delays, is the weight of the rocket. If you have a heavy rocket and you use a 3-second delay, that thing might already be on the ground before it ejects. So that's why Estes will tell you what ones they recommend for it, and then based on your own trial and error and experiments, you can mess around with that somewhat. But be careful, you don't want a rocket back on your head before it ignites. Model rocket engines cannot be shipped via mail, so your starter sets do not come with engines. So if you wanted to buy one of these for a gift for someone and mail it to them, go right ahead. You can't mail these though. It's right on the Canada Post prohibited mailing list. Rocket engines are a no, so don't do it. And when we have people order these online and out of town, we ship them by a courier, usually Canpar. They accept them. Canada Post will not. So we've talked about the engines. There are physical sizes too. I should go into that. This was 3 rocket engines based on the most common size, the ABC. Then you have half-A engines, which are mini. They fit in much smaller. Remember I told you there's a rocket this size that takes these mini engines. Performance is kind of the same, but because it's a smaller rocket, smaller weight, all the rest of it, you don't need as much gunpowder, and it takes the smaller engine. Then after the A, B, and C, you get into D and E. You can buy D and E over the counter. This is an E rocket engine. That's why it's big like that. The D is somewhat smaller. They're usually for bigger rockets. You know, you get into bigger diameter, bigger weight, and you need these bigger engines to fly them. Now, altitude-wise, they usually don't go as high as the little guys because they're not as streamlined and don't go as fast. But they look majestic. You know, we used to have one called a Phoenix. You know, the Phoenix missile that's on an F-14 Tommy gun. It was a good 2 feet anyways, maybe 30 inches long, and it had a big diameter like this. When you put that D-size engine and you flew it, you could actually watch it fly. It was very graceful to watch. Some people enjoy that aspect of it rather than these little guys that fire up like a missile, you know, when it's all over. These other ones, you can watch them, track them. They're a lot more, you know, real life rocket type looking things. So it depends what you like in a hobby. You can buy basic rockets that are ready to fly to the box, or almost ready to fly to the box, and they go in skill levels 1, 2, and 3. They're unpainted, they're balsa wood, there's more construction. Sometimes there's rings and different, or decals, or it's a scale model of a real life rocket like a Saturn V. There's more complexity to them, more building. Some people enjoy that. It's like building model kits, except these ones can fly. I think I've covered all the basics. As I said, this is the absolute basic introductory to model rocketry. We'll have other videos. We'll talk about some tips and tricks and things we've learned over the years in doing them, how to make them a little more fun, how to put on a little more of a show if the kids are getting bored with just watching them go up and down. I hope you've enjoyed this. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already. Consider signing up for our internet newsletter. We send out once a week, and we talk about new things that come in the store. Usually around March, when the weather starts to turn, is when we really stock up on the model rocketry for spring, summer. That being said, since the pandemic started, we found a big increase in model rocket sales. They were kind of declining. We were wondering if it was even a thing anymore, but I guess with people looking for stuff to do during the COVID pandemic, model rocketry was one thing they remembered they had fun with, and a lot of people have been buying starter sets and getting back into it. So I hope this will ignite, if you will, interest in the hobby. We're always looking for new ideas. If there's stuff you'd like us to do a video or talk about, please send in your questions or your ideas, and we'd be happy to look at them and possibly put a video on regarding a topic of interest to you. Thanks for watching. Look forward to doing this again soon.